Welcome back. In this section of the course, we're going to talk about pollinating your citrus tree. And there are going to be 3 parts depending on the type of tree you're using and the amount of work you want to do. So let's get started. Part A is very simple. Every citrus tree that I am recommending that you grow are self-pollinating citrus trees. What this means very simply is you don't have to do any work. You can have 1 tree or you could have 10 trees and the fruit will still grow no matter if you pollinate them yourselves or not. With this type of tree though, I do recommend making sure you bring it outside in the summer so that pollinators like bees, birds, hummingbirds, insects can pollinate the trees. If you keep it indoors all year round, you can still pollinate it, but we're going to talk about how you would personally have to do that. Part B has to do with if you have 2 different types of citrus trees. For example, if you had 2 different types of lemon trees that would need to be cross-pollinated, we want to make sure that the proper techniques are happening. If you have your plants or your trees growing outside all year round, there is nothing you need to do. Just make sure that your citrus trees, if planted in the ground, are 6 to 12 feet apart to allow pollinators to cross-pollinate between the trees. If you keep them in pots, again, I recommend moving them outside in the spring and summer to let those pollinators pollinate your trees. Typically, again, I would want to keep my gardening containers no more than 6 to 8 feet apart to allow those birds, bees, and other insects to easily travel from one tree to another. In part C is with you actually self-pollinating the tree by you manually doing that. So that is going to work very well with self-pollinating trees, but you can also do it with cross-pollinating trees. So I'm going to just talk a little bit through how you would manually self-pollinate a tree, but if you refer to a section later in the course, I will actually show how it's done. So let's talk a little bit around that. This is a very easy way and a very easy technique to self-pollinate the tree manually. You have 2 options. You can go out and purchase a self-pollinating electric pollinator. I think it's $5, $10. It's very reasonable. Or you can use a paintbrush if you have it in the house. Either will do the job. I personally like this handy tool because I think it works a little bit better. So very simply, if I have just 1 lemon tree, and we'll show this a little bit later closer up, I'm just going to go ahead and take my self-pollinator, my electric pollinator. I'm going to go ahead and take a spoon. And what I want to do is I want to look for any flower or any stem that is yellow and started to open up. You can't miss it. So the flowers are back, the petals are back, it's yellow, and that yellow you can tell is going to be what we're going to want. That is exactly where we want to start. Once we see those, and there should be maybe 4 or 5 of those flowers, we want to just very simply take the tip of this and place it under the stigma, we call it, so under the flower, and we want to just go ahead and turn it on so that it vibrates and knocks the pollen down into your spoon. We're going to do this for every single flower on your tree. You can do it for about 4 or 5 if you have more than that. And then what we're going to do is we're going to go back to those flowers, every flower on your tree, and we're going to take the stigma, that flower, and dip it into your actual pollen. So we're going to go ahead, rub it around, and we're going to do that to every flower until there's nothing left. That is the easiest, quickest way to self-pollinate your tree. If you have 2 different types of tree, like we talked about, 2 different lemon trees that need cross-pollinated, very simply, we're going to do a similar approach. Everything I just described, but once you gather all of the pollen from one tree, we're going to go to the next tree and dip it into those stigmas. So again, that cross-pollination. But we'll talk a little bit more about that in greater detail at a later section of this course. If you need to manually self-pollinate cross-pollinating trees, we're going to follow the exact same steps that I talked about. The only difference though is I would recommend having 2 spoons. 1 spoon for your first tree where we're going to gather the pollen, and another spoon for your cross-pollinating tree that we're going to gather the pollen. Once we have those 2 spoons, we're following the exact same steps. The only difference is tree 1 spoon, we're going to take it to tree 2, dip in the stigmas, and then tree 2 spoon, we're going to go over to this tree 1 and dip it in. So very simply, pretend like you're cross-pollinating them yourself. We're going to use different spoons for the different flowers, and that should actually produce more fruit for you. Regardless of whether you're outside or indoors, that's a great technique. Personally, I recommend doing it every single year if you plan on keeping your citrus trees indoors the entire year. If you're going to keep them outside, I personally have never had an issue, whether it's all year or for just part of the year, just letting them pollinate themselves. And so we'll talk again a little bit more about this in a later section, and I'll actually demonstrate it.